our next big exercise that we talked about even last night is Sabre Junction. So we're pretty excited about that, and make sure you guys get some invitations. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to
Thank you.
General Tillis.
So she just mentioned Sabre Junction. That is the next exercise. That's primarily 2nd Cav Regiment, and CJ will answer any questions about the rotational design. I think the one that's also important if you're looking for modernization and innovation is the it's Combined Resolve 2601, and that's really with the 2nd Brigade 101st. They were our Transform and Contact Brigade they did their rotation at the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana at Fort Johnson, and then they're here as a rotational brigade. And right now, the Chief of Staff of the Army, General George, has directed that they're going to do this rotation here, and General Donahue has been very quick to point out, yep, we're going to execute that. So that's also a Transform and Contact rotation. So that talks a little bit about modernization and innovation. So those are some of the things on the horizon. But I was just using that as an opening volley based off of what Lacey shared with you, and we're here to answer any questions you guys may have.
Oh, sure, yeah, sorry. Hi, thank you guys for doing this. I'm wondering if you can give us an update on Ukraine training, obviously at Grafenviewer, and what that looks like. I know it's kind of ebb and flowed as far as like what capabilities are being trained on and where that looks. So could you just give us like a status update on how many people have been trained and how many people are there now, what kind of training they're doing, that sort of thing?
So I'll start. The number 10,000 was used. Over 10,000 Ukrainians have been trained underneath 7 ATC hat. So Brigadier General Steve Carpenter was the commander before. That was mentioned in the change of command speech by General Donahue. So I'm thinking the number's probably pretty close to accurate. But I think underneath the headquarters, we got a joint multinational training group, Ukraine. So the JMTGU is what we use as the acronym, but they're forward, and it's headed up by 278th out of Tennessee. So they're on orders, Title 10, as they're here forward, and they're training Ukrainians at Grafenviewer right now. So they're pulled off the line, and we're helping pull them together, and then it's everything from basic officer leadership type things to the integration of UAS systems into multi-domain fighting from EW and drones, etc. So we are doing that, and then we're also implementing the lessons learned from Security Assistance Group Ukraine. That's already forward by default as a higher headquarters. We're partnered with them, so it's easier for us to work with that formation, and that's under General Buzzard and Command Sergeant Major Morgan. We're able to pull that together and apply those in everything we do, whether it's a simulated exercise or in a combat training center rotational exercise. Gentlemen, anybody want to add to it? Start with
Sure. The only thing I'd add is I think 7th ATC is uniquely postured as a headquarters to upscale or downscale as necessary based on the environment where we stand ready. We've done higher scale things with Ukrainian soldiers in the past and are ready to do so right now based on demand. JMTGU mostly has it covered with the things that General Tillis discussed.
Then one thing I did not mention, that is General Donahue's number one for us. His line of effort one is enable the Ukraine fight. So that's his priority, and that's what we spend a lot of our time and energy to do that. Just the command is set up differently to do that. We can provide the training and resource opportunities. It's now to put them back forward as they go forward.
And so has the groups of Ukrainians coming through, has that remained relatively steady over time, or have we seen dips in people, more people coming through, or has it been relatively?
It's remained steady over time. What I would say is it depends on what's going on forward, right?
Right.
So if there's a major offensive and there's a counter offensive to it, there may be a reduced number of personnel that'll come through just because of the operational environment. But we've been pretty steady with it, and we've been able to train multiple ranks at echelon. So and again, this is a unique piece to us. We're training them on certain capabilities, but they're innovating forward. And so we're learning as much from them as much as we're training. And I think that's the neat piece in the partnership of it is they're bringing back information from the front line. We're able to incorporate that to the design of our training exercises.
I'm sorry, so the only thing I'd add is, again, the 7th ATC, again, ready to do this, but as part of the larger construct under INSATU, multiple nations in the alliance are doing coordinated but separate efforts in different locations. So Ukrainian training happens apace across the alliance.
Can you say like what you learned most from them? You say you're taking what you've learned and incorporating it into your training. I guess that's the U.S. training.
Fight first, CJ.
I could go on for a long time. Uniquely postured with our access to SAG-U under General Buzzard and Sergeant Major Morgan to immediately, we have conversations routinely. I pull from his team all the time about what they're seeing in the fight today. You know, what the fight was in 2022 is very vastly different from 2025, but also cautious, right? Because both Ukraine and Russia, frankly, aren't fighting necessarily the way they want to. They're fighting the way they have to. So we're cautious not to pull the wrong lessons, but incorporate those and focus right now on electronic warfare as it's matured. Right, Russia was probably top tier in terms of EW when this started. Ukraine is more than their match today, and it's far more sophisticated. UAS, as all things, that it's able to both to see, to strike, to fix, to assess, to do a variety of things, and be competitive at the edge of the battlefield. Trying to incorporate those things. And then, also there's a lot of survivability lessons that we're learning from this. Being able to concentrate in one place, understanding that you're under observation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain, dark, sunshine, or snow, you are going to be seen, and if you stay still too long, you will die, and you have to be further away from the flock. We have to be more careful how we evacuate casualties. All those things we're incorporating in both the training outcomes we expect from units, whether they be U.S. or from our allies and partners, and then also our opposition force. We absolutely make them, we want them to be, whatever's on the battlefield yesterday in Ukraine, that's what we want our op for to be today, reflecting that threat as we were fighting our first fight against it while it's in a controlled environment, nobody's getting hurt.
And
So
go ahead.
So is the biggest difference between 2022 and today that Ukraine is better than, or what are the biggest? You said it's vastly different. What?
Well, I think both.
I would say it's the character of war, right? It's evolved.
Yeah.
And I think they're innovating so quickly. So it's the use of the EW, electronic warfare, it's the use of the UAS, it's the use of how you're targeting and setting the conditions. It's how they're utilizing their capabilities to defend while also retaining an offensive capability. That is very different than what it was in 2022 because it's now informed as they're taking technology and making it a part of a much larger fight. So at a strategic level, to the operational, to the tactical level, it's linking it all back together. But they're doing it at a pace that's just off the charts. I don't think we've seen anything like this for over 80 years at best. And it's a large-scale combat operation at the pace and the tempo what our technology provides. That's what's uniquely different. And I would argue and contest that it wouldn't matter, and I'm gonna give it back to my colleague down here from the NATO perspective, but we're having to innovate quickly, we're having to do these things, and we're learning, and it's not just observing, it's like, we've observed a lot, but what are we actually gonna learn and implement? And I think those are the significant changes, and what CJ was talking about is clearly, those are things that we have to do. For lack of better terms, we have to fight to get into the fight. You have to survive and be able to defend to transition into the offense to take it back. And I said it out there on the panel earlier, you still need to have boots on the ground. You cannot get around that at some point. And to General Donnie's point, the BCT still has to get onto the ground, Brigade Combat Team. So your thoughts from the NATO?
I think, also going back to what Security just said, 27, I think that creates the imperative for all of us to innovate and transform very rapidly, to be able to actually operate on the current and not future operating environment, which creates a whole different kind of threat from the tip of the spear to the rear, and by the way, also protecting our mission critical and civilian critical infrastructure at the same point, as was also mentioned by one of the defense contractors during the panel ride. So we're right now putting, I'm taking a little bit away from the civilian spear now, but we're right now putting a lot of stress on our defense industrial base to build capacity and stuff like that. Our countries also need to get the head around how do we then protect that defense industrial capacity to make sure it continues to support us even during the war? Because we need to get away from the thinking of frontline states, rear area states. If we have a war, the threat will be all over the security AO, including probably also in the US in some shape or form. So that's the perspective. And coming back to my previous capacity in the Danish Army, I formulated a vision for Danish maneuver forces that, before any infantryman or any tank comes into contact with the enemy, that enemy should have been in contact with some kind of unmanned system. And I was told, look, that's good. That's in 10 or 15 years time we're looking to that. It's not. We need to understand the speed of transformation and innovation right now. And we need to get on that train, because otherwise we'll not catch up with the adversary who's already on that train. So I think that's my perspective.
Sir, Ken Kraetzer, Canvets Media, New York City area. You're working with Ukraine soldiers. Yesterday, many were described as having been civilians only weeks or months before. And how is that different? And they're showing innovation from bringing in technical skills. How is it working with soldiers like that versus what you're used to, at Fort Benning or at West Point, where you're training individuals to progress in the Army?
Thank you for the question. In the speed in which we're doing things now, I think it's becoming the new norm. And what I mean by that is, we're very comfortable now with defense contractors. We're very comfortable with understanding that we're going to have industry partnered with us. And that's my ask back, is we want to continue to modernize. We want the industry with us to help inform us, because you got to bring the technician, the tactician together. And the only place to do that's in the field, where you're experimenting with it. And I think that's the key. And it's not, you gotta look past, I got Command Sergeant Major here with me, you gotta look past the rank. Hey, who has the capability? Who has the knowledge, skill set to help us innovate truly? And there's stories all through the United States Army and across the Joint Force and across NATO. It's not by rank, and I think we saw an example of that yesterday with the gentleman who's really become essentially the UAS, the master UAS trainer, builder, and he's the one that operationalizes all those operations across Ukraine. So it's the normalcy of doing that with these contractors in defense. The second part of it, and this is unique for 7th Army Training Command, we're evolving now in line with the Chief of Staff of the Army's guidance. He's asking us to partner with TRADOC, our Training and Doctrine Command, and really the centers of excellence underneath that: cyber, maneuver, and aviation primarily, followed by intel and fires. But those 3 centers of excellence are forward to help us create innovative ways. And an example I'll use is the 25 MOS and the 17 MOS. You have a spectrum manager and a spectrum controller. Well, you need both to fly UAS, and you got to have the ability to control the spectrum, so you have to have somebody that's all partnered in 3. Is that a new MOS? Is it a new cell-like capability? And then, as Mr. Creed talked about today, is getting into doctrine, but it's really informing the .mil-PF solution so that we can rapidly do that here and not wait to do it back stateside, but to get the information and essentially an experimental test lab forward. We have all this information, the technology, the personnel, to get that quickly back and get it into our younger soldiers, so it's the new normal for them as part of their POI for basic or AIT.
Thank you.
So I also think in a way, a huge difference is because you're bringing in these people that may be 30, 40 years old, who some of them may even have PhDs, right? Their ability to innovate and the acceptance of the command to take that technology or that thought process and rapidly bring it in is something that we just don't see right now in Western militaries, right?
Sure.
It's got to go through the acquisition process and things of that sort. So that's a huge I think piece of the rapidness of what's happening over there is someone who may have been a logistics, person, worldwide logistics business person, is now a specialist equivalent in their military, and he looks at something and goes, why are we doing it that way? Why don't we do it this way? And the change is made really the next day in some cases, so.
And I have something to add to it before I do that. Commander Major.
Yes, sir. So just some perspective with regards to the Ukrainian soldiers that are being trained. It's important to keep in context that they face an immediate threat upon the completion of their training.
Sure.
So as, if you look at a lot of our forces, as we're bringing them through initial entry training, through their advanced individual training, they believe it's important, their training. They don't have that same sense of urgency or sense of finality to what they're going to learn.
Sure.
So as we're training our Ukrainian counterparts, one, we're meeting them where they're at. We have a full appreciation. A part of bringing them in is, the demographics, where are you coming from, what's your experience, and then tailoring the training to them. But you often find that they're asking for more. They're like, I have time available. I don't need that much sleep. What additional training can I get? Can we touch that piece of equipment X amount more times? Can I get one so that I can practice on my own?
All right.
So I think that's something that is often overlooked, is that the minute they leave, it is incredibly real for them. And they know that, so they don't squander a single opportunity.
Sure.
And that last piece to dovetail, that we're all being directed to innovate. We want to innovate. And it doesn't matter where the capability or the knowledge comes from. I think the thing that 7th Army Training Command can do is integrate it. And I think it's integrating it forward so we can experiment in the lab forward to actually increase the time or decrease the time for change. I mean, that's the key piece, because we're uniquely, by disposition, postured to do that, just by where we're task organized, who we work for, who we're already partnered with, the 32 NATO countries, and we're everywhere all across Europe. So I think because of that, and I think General George recognizes that, and he's asked us, he's charged us with that under General Donahue's guidance to do that. And again, it's not what we need to sort of draw it down and look at, it's what we can do is expanding the aperture and be more creative and work our way through that.
So is most of the training done here in Europe with the Ukrainian forces?
So that's a two-part question. I'll answer for 7th ATC, yes. So yes, they're generally pulled that off the lines there. Now, SAG-U and elements that are forward, that is their mission set, but I would argue that underneath the USARAP hat, we're all mutually supporting one another to help enable the Ukraine fight. So it's not just what we're doing at the national level, but it's what we're doing down at the strategic, operational, and then the tactical level. So we are linked in that way, but the primary training audience is back in Europe.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have another one. Major Brogdon yesterday and the general officer and during the panel were both talking about, obviously, a lot about drones and using drones and how the U.S. and NATO countries needed to be implementing more about drone warfare into our own strategies. Can you talk a little bit about the training that's occurring there? And I know you've said, and we've been hearing for a long time, how much we are learning from Ukrainians when they come in, with their experiences that they're having on the battlefield. Is any of that drone related, and kind of what we're learning from them in that sense?
I'm going to tee this one up for CJ, but 100%. So the opening comment about the Transformation and Contact Brigade, 2nd Brigade, 101st, and the rotation combined with all 2601 that we're going to do here just every a few weeks. It's the ability to combine the electronic warfare and UAS. One, you got to give the soldier the kit. 2, you got to put them in an environment where they can train. 3, I see my job as getting the resources and the authority so that we can actually train with that equipment forward and apply those lessons observed / lessons learned as we do that. But by rotational design, we are implementing them, and I'll turn it over to CJ to talk that.
So absolutely, from both from being involved with training Ukrainian soldiers and then just observing, right? We're trying to learn from that. And in the panel I talked about, we had rotation with over 200 small UAS up in a relatively limited training area, which was extraordinary. But we must make that ordinary. That has to be everyday business. Is one thing we're learning from the Ukrainians. The other thing that I think is critical to this is, and General Tillis touched on it, using UAS as a new form of mass, a new way of establishing, maintaining contact, and applying lethality is enormously complex. It's not just about having a joystick and flying. It is complex in terms of navigating through the electromagnetic spectrum, complex in terms of establishing the correct conditions to use it correctly, complex in terms of weaponeering and applying the right lethality, the right thing, and then massing that so you actually affect the enemy. And we're learning all that stuff from the Ukrainians because they're very, very good at it. JMRC is under 7th Army Training Command, one of the laboratories. Everybody's working on this in the Alliance. But it's one of the laboratories where we are endeavoring to show that, not just as a skill set that's practiced by itself, but in a realistic training environment where they're under threat from the enemy under all domains. And again, Sabre Junction coming up here in September, and then Combined Resolve 2601 coming up in October are two instances where you'll see U.S. units, one a Stryker Brigade, the other a Mobile Brigade Combat Team, really at the cutting edge of what the U.S. Army's trying to do regards UAS. Great opportunities to see it in action.
And then what we're doing in the 7th Army Training Command is, so we're moving out with it. So for an example, we're partnering with 5th Corps units. So they are aligned under them, but we mutually support one another. And most of the resources, I think all of them, belong to 7th ATC. So underneath that command, we're working through live drop munitions with UASs. So our company level, General Donahue been very specific. Every rotational unit will leave with a company level training both day and night, live certified. So we're doing live drop munition drops with our UAS. So we're experimenting with that, we're flying it, we're dropping it, and then we're also learning about what authorities we need and who we need to ask to get that. And sometimes it's federal, sometimes it's state, and then there's a part of that the command will do to help facilitate it. And then we're also partnering with 5th Corps for Project Fly Trap, and I think you've heard about that. But those are the ways that we're a part of everything that we're doing, Project Shiv, et cetera. So they're buzzwords, but we're actually having to put the intellectual work into it. And that's where part of the lessons learned is like, well, they've already figured out how to do X, Y, and Z. Let's implement that faster and let's get it to where it's codified and it's now a requirement to train so we can do it faster. And it becomes, to your earlier question, sir, every soldier that comes through knows that you're gonna fight. You'll fight a counterfight with drones, you gotta survive, and you'll be able to fight offensively with drones and how that incorporates your work. Mr. Esker, you raised your hands. Did you want to add to that?
Sir, you were hitting on the company live fire requirements that General Donahue has levied on all rotational forces that come over, as well as our assigned forces. This is a game changer because what we do in Europe will then transfer to CONUS, and all of those forces will start to use kinetic UAS in their company live fire. And sir, you did say it. We are layering on that realistically what the fight is showing us. And we will be doing that at night with EW conditions present. So that is an excellent example of taking the fight and either copying it or then starting to iterate off of it. It will only go forward from here.
Thank you.
That's great. Yes, sir.
General, just thinking about something General Carpenter was talking about as an overall objective, we hear from Washington, is the idea of becoming more lethal, with the changes in the Army. Is there a sense about, the Army's been pretty lethal for a long time. How do you take it to another level, would you say?
So I think, and I listened to a little bit of this panel before we stepped down the Warriors Corner. There's two ways of looking at it. We are very lethal. We have existing capability. We do. I would argue we're the best Army in the world because of our soldiers and our non-commissioned officer corps. And I think that's a big piece to it that people in a tech world don't talk about, but the non-commissioned officer corps carries the day. So I can give guidance. I don't have to fight the formation necessarily. I command it so that the non-commissioned officers and the leaders, subordinate leaders can command, control, and fight at their level. That's a key difference. I think the second piece of it to increasing lethality is applying the technology so that you can make contact, as General Neeson said, with something unmanned. So you're preserving combat power. You're now taking away his combat power with something that's unmanned and at low cost. So we're preserving our capability to mass at a point of our choosing, which now we're overwhelmingly lethal. And I think that's the key piece of incorporating technology. And it's in all domains, it's for all the services, that we've gotta work together. There's no better place right now than NATO to do that, because we're already in a conflict, and we're not just talking about what could be, we're actually in one right now, and we're supporting a partner nation in that. That's what how I interpreted lethality, and from my perspective, that's exactly how we have overmatch and will retain the overmatch. I think the other thing that we are still learning is how to survive. We gotta preserve capability. So is it by disposition of how far back you are, or is your ability to hide inside of the electronic warfare spectrum? Is it your ability to hide inside of for lack of better terms, I'll talk the cyber domain? Where do you go, what do you do, and how do you preserve that capability? That ultimately increases your lethality, because you can't have it 24/7, but you gotta be able to mass on it. Whether it's a aircraft system, an F-35, whether it's a long range rocket, whether it's hypersonics, it all requires, it's gotta come from somewhere, and you gotta preserve that. And at the end of the day, you gotta preserve the boots on the ground and the human dynamics, so that when you choose now at the tactical level that you wanna seize terrain, that's a big piece of it, and that is lethality as a whole.
Thank you.
Bob, did you have any questions?
Mr. Bob? Okay.
You know, the lethality goes two ways, right? If you look across my commanders, those are relatively small nations. The more boots they put forward in a war situation, the bigger an effect it'll have on their demographics for the future. So the more robots, the more machines they can put forward, the better a situation they'll be in after the fight, to continue to be a nation that is actually accumulating wealth, freedom for their population. So I think we also need to see it in that context. The impact of the fight in Ukraine right now on Russian and Ukrainian demographics for the future will have significant strategic impact, which will actually define, I mean, there is a here and now outcome of the war, but there's also a long-term outcome of the war, defining the state, the conditions of those nations after the war. That is why, not just because of our efforts and our values in the Western world in terms of preserving human life, but that is also actually why it's important for us to move fast and move forward and get machines to the front, to preserve human life and to create better conditions for a better peace after the war.
Sir, could you describe your role and responsibilities?
So, as multinational call of these, we are a core headquarters assigned to NATO. We are directly under command of General Donahue with his NATO hat on, and our task is to deter Russian aggression, to be honest, across the eastern front from Estonia in the north to northeastern Poland in the south. For that purpose, we have a number of divisions with subordinate formations assigned through the NATO structure throughout those nations. So every time somebody's talking about a forward deployed battle group, that is actually under command of Secure, going down to General Donahue, to us, to a division commander, to a brigade commander, who then has that NATO brigade under command in the NATO command structure. And our role on a daily basis is to command and control those operations, deterrence operations. We prepare to defend those nations as well, and ultimately to defeat the enemy if he chooses to attack. So that's our role and our mission, and we live that on a daily basis. People tend to forget, and we as NATO soldiers tend to forget, that we are already in a crisis situation. NATO chose to activate parts of the gradual response plans after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we are actually operating under those authorities and permissions that was given by the North Atlantic Council to Secure at that point in time. So there is we call it a deterrence operations, and the way we do deterrence operations in the military is by demonstrating our capability, ultimately triggering exercise, and innovating and integrating new capabilities. That's how we achieve our return support. And telling about it to you guys.
Thank you.
Cool.
Any other questions? Anything you wanna add?
I think, for the stars to try, I'll come back to you on the numbers, because right now, you asked me specifically about, I think it came kind of from both, about the number of Ukrainians. I can't share the exact number, but I know it's generally in the hundreds here. And what I want to articulate to you is we're also doing live fire operations. So if you think about that, requires linguists, that requires a multitude of things. So it's not just training in the classroom. They're actually in a field environment. They're actually live fire training. And it can be anywhere from 200 to 400, and we can surge up into the thousands. We had more at the beginning, but it'll ebb and flow based off of what's happening forward. But we're already configured to do that, and we have plans to continue to do that all the way through 2027. So it's enduring for us, and we're continuing to evolve that training plan based off of the skill sets that they're looking for and the people that they're asking to send back. But again, it's based off of what's happening forward, and I think that that's really critical. I think with the capabilities from a strategic level, we've heard our commander-in-chief and what we're going to share. That's going to change the calculus on the battlefield once those capabilities are there, and that may alter how they utilize those systems and how our either advisors forward do that or how we're training here in Europe to help them with that.
Can I just ask one thing, just to make sure I heard it right? So every American who comes over here now, every soldier has to have a form of drone training then? That's what,
We're working to inculcate that, yes.
that's,
So it's part of our basic training and our PI, but every soldier that's here rotationally or belongs or is underneath USARAF, so that's second, so it's everybody that's here, second cab, 173rd. Yes, that is a directive from General Donahue at the company level. We'll be day, night, live certified, and that incorporates US or UAS training inside of it. Both reactionary, counter, and then also offensive.
and so when, you said that's,
We're already doing it.
all right, and how long has that been?
It's been
So
3
the
months.
first unit executing is this week.
Yeah.
And that's out of 1st Brigade, 3rd ID, using Shiv Shank as the ordinance.
We've been experimenting for 3 months, so it's taken us a while to get that capability, so from a resource and a training command, to have the authorities and the approvals so that we can train and put it as part of it. To Mr. Esker's point, yep, we'll be starting, and that is the guidance that they will all follow, regardless of the unit, but at that level, specifically at the troop company and battery level.
Right, okay, and that's just because of what you're seeing kind of,
Right, it's for us to move faster, and then we're informing the rest of the United States Army on what to incorporate into basic training and their advanced training based off their MO system. That's how we're partnered. We're uniquely configured to partner with Training and Doctrine Command, because if you look at our USARAF headquarters, it won't be 21st TSC, and it won't be the 173rd, and it won't be CTAF, it's 7th, and he's using us, meaning General Donahue, in that capacity, and he's already linked us up. We're talking directly to the Centers of Excellence to help with that. And then by default, as I was saying before, we're partnered and task organized with all these units because of where we live. So we're uniquely postured to do that. And it's in line with General Jordan's guidance. So he just came and reiterated that to me personally on Monday.
all right.
So I'm tracking.
And so you think it's gonna be eventually, the whole army's gonna be like this?
It will have to,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
And it will evolve. What we're executing this year will evolve. It won't look similar next year. There'll be different platforms, different ways of dropping ordnance, different types of ordnance being used. But this is one of the linchpins of change that's coming over the Army. And this is all based off experiences with the Ukrainians. We used them and they used us as we created this program. Their experiences were formidable in helping us to create the program.
And so it's all different types of, it's dropping a grenade, what?
Right now, it's just the M67 grenade that will be utilized by normal formations. There's also an ability to use what's called Project Shiv and Shank, which is an explosively formed projectile munition. It's basically C4 in the air, and it's a one-way delivered platform right into the target. The grenade is where it just drops onto the target, and then the UAS comes back to the user. it gets reloaded if need be.
And we've already been live firing direct strike, lethal one-way UAS that are purpose-built and designed to direct strike, to both loiter and then strike. And we've been doing that for, I think, 6 months or more, in addition to the new capability we're developing.
It's a group effort.
Any last questions? Thanks so much for the panel. Thanks so much for your time.